Hey there, and welcome back. We are on part 2 of the Sable Palms watercolor video. This will be a 3-parter, I think, unless I get stuck and need 4 parts, but I think it's going to be 3. Let's take a look at where we left off. I'm going to talk about it. So, switch views here. Ooh, modern technology. By the way, if you hear cars in the background, that's because my mom lives about 1.5 miles from the Daytona racetrack, and they're doing practice laps. It's February is the 500, so there are practice and warm-up laps being done, I think, for that. So you may hear the cars in the background. They become the background music of our lives here during these couple of months. And the only other sound you might hear besides me is my mom's Shih Tzu Snoopy, who, if he wanders over, I'll let you see him. He's out on the sun porch with me. We're in the sun porch studio, also known as my mom's sun porch. And we're going to continue with this painting. As you see, I've got the value sketch next to me. It's always to remind me of where I want to put my lights and darks. This is how far we got in the last video. I left some sky holes in the trees for the sky peeking through. Most of that will get covered as we work on the painting. I was really a little careless in here about keeping the tree stems. I expect at the very end I'm going to go in with some white gouache. Right now, the areas that have the blue sky air color over them are the shadow areas of those trees, as you can see, so it's not that big a deal, but I wanted to bring it up. Let me switch back. Okay, so colors. I'm working with my QOR travel set, my 12 color set. We're going to be working on the tops of the trees and the background area behind the trees to give them some definition. Those are the two things we're going to work on today. Maybe the trees. And we'll leave final details for the last video. So that's where we are. As far as color mixing, I'm going to use some sap green. I'm going to mix up a little puddle of the transparent orange that I like so much from QOR. And then I'm going to grab a little purple and one of the earth tone brownie colors. And I'll have them wet and ready on my palette so that we can jump right into painting and not have to mix, especially here. Let me flip back. And I'm going to stay over on the painting now for a while. Especially in here, the darker areas. I can paint this whole shape, as I've preached to you for the whole time we've been together. Paint this whole shape in one color or a wash with multiple colors in it, let that dry, and then come back in and do the darks. But the key to that is having those colors mixed. For brushes, for fine lines, I will have a liner brush, which is simply a longer haired fine point brush that holds some water and holds some paint, but can do a pretty fine line. It's also called a rigger. And then my 2 Kolinsky Sables, the number 10 for the smaller work, the number 12 that I used for most of the last video. Those will probably be the 3 brushes that we're going to work with. We'll see. I'm going to mix up my colors now. Grab a brush I don't care so much about for getting my colors out. So that yellow on this palette tends to be a little bit greeny, especially after you start working with it and contaminate it a little bit. So I got some of that yellow out too. I'm getting the orange. And let's see, we need our sap green. We need a goodly amount of that. And then I said purple. That just helps get the green dark. I'll try not to make it look purple. I know that's my favorite thing to do, but I'll try not to. And then some earthy colors, just some browns on the palette, because there are those spots in the tops of the trees or in the edges of the trees where the green tends to get a little brown and yellow. Good to have that ready. I have some paper towel in my left hand, and I have my brushes, so let's get to work. Again, I was a little sloppy, but that's okay. And the reason why it's okay is because we're painting darker, so we can correct that as we go. So I'm going to grab some pure green and start working. This guy up here is kind of all by himself. He's not really attached except by that stem. Again, I have the board at an angle. It's probably a 60-degree angle. And if you look at the value sketch, the sun is coming from here and pointing this way. The shadows are going that way. So I will leave a lot of these palm trees have these areas where the sun is touching them and they get really light. So that light side, what we can do to make that look real is come in with a darker color on the shadow side, and here I'm dropping in the same green, but I added some blue and some purple to it, and then picking up some orange and dropping it here because it's always at that point where it meets the rest of the trunk that it warms up a little bit. And I'm going to leave this other side with some white showing. I'm just going to do a couple drags so it's not so obvious. And I think that's what we're going to leave with that guy. That's not bad. Now the bigger shape. And I realized with how much green I used in that last one that I got to build up a little more green. So I just did that. And these Kolinsky brushes are nice and pointy still. Brushes, as you use them and clean them and all the things that you do with them, will definitely get less pointy, but these do last quite a while. These are really, really fine brushes. Now the key here is to not worry too much about the single shapes of the trees, but instead to come in and vary your colors a little bit. And then while it's wet, you can drop in those extra bits that I did with the first one. Again, keeping the right side of this mass of trees lighter as I come up to the edge. And I'm going to use a thirsty brush. I've just wiped it off on the paper towel to pick up that bead. And I'm coming in. I know that I have that darker tree back here, so I'm going to paint that shape in now. And that may need some correcting later, but it's okay that it ran back into there. In fact, even though it's the wrong side, it's the underside of the tree, so I like that a lot. As we move over to the warmer side, the sun side as it were, I'm going to throw in a little more yellow and a little more orange into our mix. And I'm going a little bit slower than I would because I'm talking. That's okay. Grab this so it doesn't run down too much. And I kind of divided that side up too much. I'm going to just drop in some dark across both sides to break up the feel of that. And use now to drag out some of those pointy bits. Okay, that's looking good. And this tree in the back is light in the front, but it gets darker as it comes up to the edge of the tree in front of it. Kind of, we use that to springboard and push that first tree towards us. So I'm going to do that right now, throw in some dark. Right here. Then this under tree that's in the background here is also darker. Use the point of that brush to drag out some of the pointy bits again. And it's I do like these Arteza notebooks. They definitely, the paper really holds up nicely. Now we can really green up that. And we're make sure that when you dab in these edges that you mix them up a little bit. Don't make them too pure one way or the other. Paint negatively into the top of the tree in front. That helps give you that shape. We're doing pretty good. I'm going to use the brush now to pick up some of that excess color, because again we're painting at an angle. We're going to leave the bases of the trees for later. I'm just going to paint in the background behind the trees, and then we'll be good to go. This video is running a little bit longer than I wanted, so I don't want to go too dark, or I mean too long with this one. And if you look at the value sketch, this is really just a little hilly, bushy shape behind the trees. Now the great thing about this is that we can mix up the color in it. So drop in some bits of darks and warms down at the bottom, and as you get closer to the trees. And now's a good time to be super careful, because now you can pull out the shapes of those tree barks, tree trunks. Boy, I'm having trouble with that word today. Now you see how the tree trunks look more like tree trunks, because I've got a good line to them. Although I made this one disappear. So go in with a thirsty brush and grab it. I'm going to do the same thing here. Fill in that space. And that definition, and you can use a muddy color. It doesn't have to be perfectly one color or another. All you want it to do is help separate the trees and the bushes, the background and the foreground. It's not rocket science. Just a little bit of, now throwing a little bit of red in there for variety. I just grabbed some off my palette. Make sure to vary the heights and shapes, and even dry your brush out a little bit. And once it's dry, you can dry it on the paper towel. You can even come in and dry brush this a little bit, so it gets a little bit more texture, especially down towards the bottom. And the last thing I would do with this is, while it's still wet, we've got the height varied nicely. I want to darken up this side a little bit more. Just drop in a little bit of earth tony color. Just come in, right now we have a hard edge at the bottom of it, so I'm going to get my brush wet. And I'm going to dry it off on the paper towel and just find a few spots where I just want to wipe out that hard edge. It doesn't have to be everywhere. It shouldn't be everywhere, in fact. You want to have what they call in painting lost and found edges. So some places where they're definitely defined, and some places where they're not. And while we have just a second, I'm going to just start to put some color in down here behind the base of the trees. That will help you see the shapes. And I'm just going to pull this out here. One thing that has done, by doing this with just that little bit of warm color, it's nothing fancy, but I know that there's a big shadow here. So I can drop in some dark color, and it runs like this, and there's some dark coming here, and this actually in here gets filled in dark, and this side of this stump. Alright, same thing, except here we're going to smudge the shadow on the light side. There's definitely a thing that happens in nature where the shadow, you soften it into the sun side. Now you can clearly see the shapes of the trees. And we're not going to have to do as much with them as we thought. So when we come back in video 3, I'm going to work on the detail of this area, so we'll be doing a little splattering. We'll mix up some colors. We'll do a jagged kind of wash because I want to get this Z shape really showing, or not so much showing, but just finalized so that you get that feel behind there. I love this. I love this wash. It's got oranges, it's got a little bit of red in it, it's got yellows, it's got greens. What I'm going to do with it is darken the darker ones in the next video, and then we'll do the trunks from there, the shadows and the trunks. And I think we're going to be okay with the trunks being white, or maybe just a warmed up, very light color. The tops of the trees will get a little bit more definition, but I really like the way that wash came out. So far we're keeping it nice and simple, trying not to think too much. I don't think too much when I'm talking, that's for sure. And in fact, while I'm here, I'm just going to start throwing some of that grass in, get that brush wet, and then dry it off, come in and do some lost and found edge work. Now I've got some of the grasses in for later. Okay, so that's part 3. As I try to duck around the camera, here we go. That was part 2, rather. We're going to do the finishing details in the next video. This will be up on Friday or Saturday, and the final one will be Tuesday morning before what would have been our regular class time. It may be available Monday, I'll let you know. And if anybody has any ideas for what they would like to see for a demo for next week for me to work on, let me know, and we will do it. So keep painting, and I'll talk to you soon.